This is the City of Rancho Mirage radio test for the Rancho Mirage Library. Trying to reach Commissioner Barry. Are you out there this evening?
Yeah, that's affirmative.
And what is the assessment tonight for the event?
The assessment is that we have a great audience here of Rancho Mirage citizens, and the forum has begun.
Excellent. Carry on.
I'm Roger Barry with the Emergency Preparedness Commission. We certainly welcome you here to our annual event. What you saw us do there is something that many of you might not know about, and that is the continuing effort that the city makes to communicate with its residents. And we do that in several ways. The homeowners associations are all welcome to participate in a radio program that puts them in touch with City Hall in case there's an emergency. What that looks like is that we have radio communication rooms both at City Hall and a secondary one right here. Were there to be an event, the HOA radios would then be in touch with our emergency communication centers. From our emergency communication centers, we have satellite phones, which will put us in touch with the county, the state, and FEMA to make sure that the needs of Rancho Mirage residents are well met during a crisis. We are working on this, and if you are part of a homeowners association that doesn't have a radio program, we would like to sign you up and give you more information about that. And at the end of the program, all you would do is go to the table in the back of the room, and we have an HOA radio sign up. And thank you for your attention to that. Now, the city also has, among the city employees, their radio communication program, the same types of radios, so that they operate in a system were there to be an emergency that they can respond if all other forms of communication are down. So we are pleased to do this for you. We are constantly trying to improve it, and it works best when we get broad community participation. Tonight, we are very pleased to have a person familiar to most of you in the desert, CBS Local 2's Patrick Evans. And Patrick is going to come here and he's going to emcee and do the program for us. Thank you very much.
So if you're working with an HOA, please be sure to get involved with that radio program, because I think it's probably going to be one of the most important things in a crisis, because you'll have an opportunity to work with the emergency coordinators through the city and help the residents. My name is Patrick Evans. I am the chief meteorologist and also host of Eye on the Desert for CBS Local 2 Television. I'm also a proud Rancho Mirage resident, have been for many years, and I serve on the Historic Preservation Committee here as well. So I was delighted when the city asked me to participate tonight. I would like to recognize our council members who are present. Mr. Richard Kite is here. He's in the back, making sure no one escapes out the back during the presentation. Iris Smotrich is here. Ted Weil is here. Where's Ted? Also in the back. So we've got the exits covered. You can't leave until we're done. I'm sorry. Dana Hobart could not be with us, but I would like to introduce to you the mayor of Rancho Mirage, Mr. Scott Hines, who would like to say a few words of welcome to you. Scott?
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome here to the Rancho Mirage Library. We're very pleased that you're here this evening to come and learn about this very important topic. Emergency preparedness is something that we all need to study and learn about. It's important that we are all prepared. You know, there are many different roles that are played by different people in the event of a natural disaster or an emergency. The city certainly has its roles. Our police force has its roles. Our law enforcement entities, our fire department, the staff at City Hall, even the mayor and the council has very specific roles during an emergency. But you also have a role in an emergency. And it is incumbent upon all of us to take responsibility, first and foremost, for ourselves, to make sure that we're prepared and can maintain a sense of independence during an emergency, and also a responsibility to help our neighbors and to be there when they need us. You know, we have many elderly people that are here in Rancho Mirage that may need a neighbor to really reach out and take care of them in the event of a disaster. So I really applaud you for being here tonight and taking that first step towards assuming some of that responsibility so that you can be part of the team. I would also really encourage each of you to consider signing up for CERT training. That's Community Emergency Response Team. Some of you have already been through that training. It's fascinating, and it really gives you that opportunity to be a leader within your local neighborhood and community in the case of the unmentionable of a disaster that might come. So you'll hear more about that, I'm sure, tonight. But I just want to thank you for stepping up and being activist citizens and coming here to learn and better yourselves as we give these presentations. So thanks again for being here, and we're all here to support you if you have any questions. Thanks.
Before we begin the program, I also want to recognize our city manager, Randy Binder, is here. Where's Randy? He was here just a few moments ago, but we appreciate his presence. And also, really technically, our host for the evening, David Bryant, who's the director of the library here in Rancho Mirage and hosts this event. One of the reasons that the city reached out to me, they had actually reached out across all of the media companies within the valley to come and tonight to make a presentation to you about our emergency preparedness plan. The response was overwhelming, because you can see we have all of the stations and the newspaper. No, we don't have any of them. I'm the only one. But luckily, I actually am here representing both CBS Local 2, KESQ Television, because we are owned by the same parent company. And I also do a great deal of work with K-News Radio and the Morris Desert Media Group. And so I can speak just a little bit to each of those companies' plans when, and it's not really an if, it's when that big emergency, be it an earthquake or other natural disaster, happens. And I'll tell you honestly, one of the reasons that we don't have all of our media companies here present to talk about this is when I was handed our emergency preparedness plan, the very first page says proprietary information, share at the risk of immediate termination. So what I'm going to tell you tonight can get me fired. Don't talk. You can speak of it never again after this. No, I've culled parts that I think are of interest, perhaps, at least salient to the point of emergency preparedness. And for a television station, obviously, now one of the nice things about the company that we now work for, the combined organization that is CBS Local 2, KESQ, Kuna Television, Fox, and MyCW. We have 5 different television broadcast facilities under one roof. We also have a Hispanic radio station group under that same roof. So we have the opportunity to reach out on many different platforms across the valley to virtually every person in the valley. And I will tell you just in broad brushstrokes the plan. And when that call comes in, when that big earthquake hits, we are an all-hands-on-deck situation. Every employee of the station is expected to be there unless there is a critical injury in your family. Otherwise, we are going to be there, and we will be, at that point, on 24/7. Now, when that happens, likely much of the valley won't have electricity. But there are other ways, online ways, battery-powered devices where you might be able to receive a television or a radio signal, or at least check things online, and or on your mobile device, which you may not be able to charge, but you will have some opportunity. Now, also, we are aware that in the event of a major earthquake, you may not have very much in the way of cell tower use, because some of the towers will go down, they will lose power. So all of our platforms, we will be disseminating information. Whether or not you will be able to get it is a different question. But we've also had to tackle a number of issues ourselves at the television station. One of those chief concerns, of course, is electricity. When we go down in terms of electricity, all of our facilities are powered by backup generators that have approximately an 8 to 10 day usefulness to them. So if we are stuck without the ability to get fuel, or electricity for 8 to 10 days, we can broadcast under normal operations. And that is true not just for our facility. Right now we are working out of a facility on Cook Street. We will eventually move back to the CBS 2 location, which is in Thousand Palms, directly across the freeway. But all of our transmitter sites also have emergency generator power to last for the same amount of time. So we will be at work, on the air, on the internet, on the radio, making sure that whatever information that we can garner and get out to you in terms of, if there is an evacuation, if there is no way to evacuate, we'll be there. And one of the things that we had to address, our Thousand Palms location, in the event of a major earthquake, if the bridges go down, we're on the other side of the railroad tracks. So we actually have had to devise a means, and we're still kind of working out the kinks, but we will actually be able to lay something, basically, we've constructed over the railroad tracks to get our live trucks over the tracks so we can get into the rest of the valley. And that's one of the things that we're very concerned about, is being cut off from actually being able to get out into the valley. The technology for our live broadcast has changed a great deal, really, in the last couple of years. How many of you have seen our live trucks going throughout the town with a little dish on the top? Have you guys seen those trucks? It was, at one time, state-of-the-art technology. It really no longer is. We now have a piece of equipment. It's called a Dejero. I don't know how it got that name, but it's a briefcase-sized piece of equipment. And we can now broadcast live from virtually anywhere that there's a cell signal. So we can tap into the cellular system and actually get, and this was one of the things that they worked on for a long time. There has been cell phone video for a long time, but you no doubt have seen it. I think one of the best examples was in the Gulf War. They would frequently get cell phone video from the foreign correspondents, and it was terrible. It was hard to listen to. It was harder to watch. It wasn't TV ready. Well, now these devices, and we have 2 of them, and they can go literally anywhere. Did you all see any of our coverage of the end of the Dorner chase, the day that all happened? We were live throughout the afternoon, but we had broadcast. We had a reporter and a team up in Big Bear. That is someplace that we would not have been able to get live broadcast coverage from. You would either have to have had a satellite truck, which is very expensive, the truck itself and the time. But now this device allows us to do that virtually anywhere. So when there is an emergency, large or small, we will be able to tap into the cellular signal and get our live broadcast out there. So those are some of our plans. I can tell you a little bit about the Desert Sun's plans, because I actually at one time was married to someone who worked there. So I can tell you this, and it doesn't matter. They do have a plan to get you a newspaper. If the presses were to be damaged or stopped here in the Coachella Valley, obviously they're part of a large company called Gannett. The nearest big Gannett paper is Phoenix, but they are contracted with other smaller papers as well, who may or may not be owned by Gannett, who will print emergency editions of the Desert Sun, and they will be delivered as best they can. And obviously they have a pretty big online presence as well. But the truth of the matter is, and I think that Dr. Mileti is going to speak to this fairly poignantly in a few moments, but the truth of the matter is, when the big earthquake does strike, you're going to be on your own for a little while. And you may or may not have any access to outside sources of information, even though we're going to be there doing it. You have to be prepared, and I would encourage you at the end of the evening, those vendors will still be out there. And one of the things, those emergency packs with food and water and other items, I think that's vital. And then there's also the damage mitigation, safety-proof folks out there to make your home a much safer place in case of a large earthquake. So avail yourselves of those things, because it is going to be vital. It may be a day, it may be 3 days, it may be a week, but we are likely, when the big earthquake does hit, to be essentially stranded for a little while and have to rely upon our own resources. So that just gives you some idea. And we're going to have questions and answer sessions at the end of this for all of our panelists, and I would welcome any questions you might have about our intentions on covering that. But right now, I would like to introduce to you a gentleman who has really spent a lifetime of work in this field. He was, in fact, appointed by President Reagan to be in the U.S. delegation to the Soviet Union. They had a series of very serious earthquakes, and he went there in the 1980s. He also directed the investigation of the evacuation of the World Trade Center towers that happened on 9/11. He did that at the direction of the United States Congress. At the request of the White House, he summarized knowledge about natural hazards, not just here, but all across our country. And that book that resulted from that work remains the most cited book worldwide ever written on that topic. Governor Schwarzenegger appointed Dr. Mileti to the California Seismic Safety Commission. He has chaired the Board of Visitors to FEMA's National Training Center for Emergency Managers during the Clinton administration. And he's also chaired the Committee on Hazards and Disasters in the National Academies of Science and Engineering. And we could go on, but I would rather, in fact, instead of telling you about him, let you hear from him. If you would, please welcome Dr. Dennis Mileti.
Thank you. I have had a wonderfully exciting career, and I've had the opportunity to go around the world and meet people in many different nations that dealt with or planned for disasters and catastrophes. And despite all I know on the subject, the most exciting thing that's ever happened for me was being able to choose to retire in a place called Rancho Mirage, California. Despite its high earthquake risk, I'm thrilled to be here. And I was asked actually to pretend I was Lucy Jones for a moment and tell you about the earthquake we face, geology in the Coachella Valley, and why we have the hazards we have. California is earthquake country. Did anybody here not know that? Not one hand went up. This is where big earthquakes happen, but they happen very infrequently. Why is that? It's plate tectonics. The earth is cracked into plates. The oceans and the continents are on top of those plates. The plates under the oceans and under the continents move in different directions. Where two plates come together under a continent, we have something we call faults. And faults move when the plates move. The Earth has several major plates. I hope you can see this. I have a red arrow pointing to us where we're sitting tonight. And as you can see, the Pacific plate goes from where we are tonight to Japan, and the North American plate goes from where we are tonight to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. These are very large pieces of geology. So we call it the San Andreas Fault, but it's really the boundary between the North American and the Pacific plates. Part of it looks like that. The parts of it that were paved over by groups like Caltrans don't look like that at all. Here's how it works. When plate boundaries aren't stuck, they move frequently, less stress builds up, and they result in small earthquakes. A place in California where that's the case is Central California, from around San Luis Obispo and Morro Bay and Parkfield, up in that region. It's a straight line, the plate moves frequently, the earthquakes are relatively small. When plate boundaries get stuck, however, they move infrequently. More stress builds up, and they result, when they happen, in larger earthquakes. For example, in the Coachella Valley. The Coachella Valley is on top of a plate boundary. It's in fact a bend in the plate boundary. South of the Coachella Valley, the plate boundary is a straight line going south. It bends and goes left to right here, and then when it gets to Palmdale, it goes north again to San Francisco. Part of I-10 is on top of the San Andreas Fault, or the plate boundary. It's between I-10 and Desert Hot Springs. If you're ever in the Banning Pass driving towards LA and you want to know where the San Andreas is, look straight down, you're on top of it. And then it goes to San Bernardino, Palmdale, San Francisco, and all around the rest of the Pacific Rim. When will the next big earthquake here happen? They don't know. We all wish they did. They wish they did, but they don't know. What the best scientists say is it will happen soon, maybe not for 50 years, but it could happen tonight. Some of them would say it this way. Our section of the San Andreas Fault is 10 months pregnant. So what would you say to a daughter or niece who was 10 months pregnant? Better pack your bag and get ready. Why do they think that? It's earthquake history. This is the San Andreas as it goes under the state of California. The blue section is the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. The orange section is the 1857 Fort Tejon earthquake. The last earthquake on our segment of the San Andreas happened in 1680. On average, these earthquakes happen every 150 years. Quakes on our San Andreas section are big. On average, they happen every 150 years, and they have for the last 900 years. There's one exception. The last one here was in 1680. That's why they think we're overdue. Do the math. They don't know why it's been stuck this long. Our fault segment is the author of Southern California. It's not to be feared or hated. It's why we like Southern California. The bend keeps it from moving. Not moving causes stress buildup, and repeated stress between earthquakes here has cracked all of Southern California. Every fault in Southern California is the result of stress building up on the San Andreas Fault here. It's created all of the rest of California, Southern California's faults, all of our mountains, all of our valleys, and all the beauty we take for granted. And the Southland shakes a lot. Those dots are earthquakes. The bigger the dot, the bigger the earthquake. Big quakes here happen about every 2 human lifetimes. The last one was, there's a mistake, that's not 2 lifetimes ago, it's supposed to be 4 lifetimes ago, I apologize. No one here remembers it because we weren't alive then. Seismologists say ours is the most likely great quake to happen in America. The southernmost San Andreas Fault, that's us, is that quake. There'll be 180 miles of fault rupture or more. That'll result in it being classified a magnitude 7.8. Don't confuse magnitude with what the earthquake's consequences are like. Magnitude is very much influenced by the number of miles the fault ruptures. So if this earthquake resulted in a fault rupture up to San Luis Obispo, we'd call it an 8.1. But the shaking here would be the same as it would be if it's a 7.8 and it stops in Palmdale. It'll have 100 seconds of fault rupture. And the shaking we'll experience will be up to 2 minutes long. Now, why is that? When you look at the mountains that are in that direction, and then look at the mountains that are in that direction, just imagine that those mountains will capture the seismic waves and they'll bounce back and forth between the mountains. So if those mountains weren't there, the earthquake wouldn't shake as long as it would if those mountains are there. So you can expect to experience strong ground shaking for 100 seconds and shaking for 120 seconds. Shaking will be severe. The darker the color red on this map, the stronger the shaking. The scale of shaking is at the top. You see all the way on the right, it's really dark. And you see down by the Coachella Valley and the Salton Sea, it's really red. It doesn't matter whether it starts at the left end and comes to us or starts here and goes to them. To put it in perspective, the Northridge earthquake had 7 seconds of fault rupture. Our earthquake will have 100 seconds of fault rupture. 120 seconds of shaking in the Coachella Valley as those seismic waves bounce back and forth. All of Southern California will be impacted. So if you're waiting for help to come from Beaumont, don't wait long. If you're waiting for help to come from Los Angeles, it's not going to happen. That's why we're going to be on our own. Some conclusions. We don't live on a safe planet. There's no place else to go. Nature causes earthquakes, but people cause earthquake losses by virtue of what we do and don't do to prepare for them. How we build our structures, whether or not we bolt our bookcases and armoires to the walls, whether or not our statuary work is secured in place, and whether or not we've maintained sufficient supplies so that we can preserve our lives in the hot sun until help does in fact get here. Human beings, however, are the main obstacle to their own seismic safety. Human beings tend to ignore risk information, hold on to thinking that they're safe, and don't get ready. Experts can't predict when our quake will happen, but they all agree the time to get ready is now, which is why we're here tonight. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your keen attention. And I'll see you again in about 20 minutes with another short presentation. Thank you.
Well, if you weren't scared when you got here, it's always good information. It's important to be reminded. And you know, I will say that I think it's very appropriate that the city of Rancho Mirage has taken the lead on this, and we have a preparedness seminar every year to kind of remind us and to give us that call to action to get ready. And as we said earlier, the chances are, and in the event of a major earthquake or other natural disaster, but particularly an earthquake, we're likely to be on our own for a little while. But that doesn't mean that we are going to be all alone for the entire time. There are organizations that are here and designed to help, and I'm going to introduce someone who's going to tell us a little bit more about those plans and the people who will be here on the ground to help out in the event of a major earthquake. Kathleen Anamosa is here with us. She is the chair of the board of the American Red Cross of Riverside County. She is a disaster volunteer who has been deployed to earthquakes like Ike and Irene. She is also a recovering lawyer. Recovering. Takes lots of treatment, a long period of time. She's also a Rancho Mirage resident, so if you would, please welcome her to the podium, Kathleen Anamosa.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to talk a bit about what the Red Cross does, but mainly we're going to concentrate on what you need to do, although we always need people to help us do what we need to do. Let me get my PowerPoint up here. Here in the Coachella Valley, we have an office for the Red Cross. It is a new office. It's in Palm Desert. And we have a bunch of volunteers. And one of the things that we do here in getting ready for a major earthquake is we train volunteers. We will be responsible under federal, state, county, and city emergency plans for what we call mass care. It is feeding and sheltering of people. Now, if this earthquake happens tonight or more Saturday night, what's in town? A lot of people. Why? The tennis tournament is now. The hotels are packed. So if this major earthquake occurs next week, while, you know, Rafael Nadal is about to make his first serve, the place is going to be packed. During the LPGA tournament, it's packed. During Coachella and Stagecoach, it's packed. And when all of those people who are visiting us get bounced out of their hotel rooms, and their hotels have to be inspected, especially the high-rise ones have to be inspected before they can get back, the Red Cross, one of the things we're going to be trying to do is get these people out of town, all right? We want them to go home so that we can take care of the residents. But we need you to be ready to take care of yourself. We will have to have any shelters that we plan inspected to make sure that the building is safe. The only mega shelter that we can put up in Riverside County is the Palm Springs Convention Center, all right? So, but it will have to be inspected before we can take you in there. And what will we likely have after this first big earthquake? We're going to have aftershocks, all right? So you need to be ready for your own quality of life, okay? Yeah, it'll be easier for me if you all aren't showing up at the shelter, where I always seem to be on a night shift. But it will be better for you, and the quality of your life will be significantly improved if you have prepared for it, and if you do it tomorrow. Do you think the people of Haiti on the January 11th, 2010, thought that their country would be destroyed the next day? Nah, they didn't think so. The people of Japan on March 10th, 2011, that started with an earthquake. Okay, we are not going to have a tsunami here. I think we're pretty safe on that one. But people assume it's going to happen another time. I'm a snowbird. I'm sure this is going to happen when I'm in Washington State, okay? It ain't going to be my problem. But it is going to be my problem one way or another. So we all have to worry about it. One thing that you should be somewhat concerned about is that although the Red Cross in Riverside County is working on getting ready for this, we only have 8,000 cots. We anticipate having to shelter 154,000 people, all right? So I hope you like gym mats, because that's where you'll be, all right, as we work on increasing our level of preparedness. As people support Sandy, which is great, we needed it, you have to remember that sooner or later you're going to need us here, and you're going to need us prepared when the earthquake hits. So let's talk about being Red Cross ready. The Red Cross was formed in 1881. We've been doing disaster relief since 1889. We have some level of experience with this. And around here, we need to prepare for earthquake, fire, which may be separate from an earthquake, windstorms, not so much hurricanes, floods, and we do have floods here. We had a flood here this summer. We had to open a shelter. Severe cold, we don't get so much, but severe heat, we do. We have opened over the years cooling stations during severe hot springs. You need to be ready for all of this, all right? And there are 3 actions that you take. Get a kit, make a plan, be informed. Not that tough. A disaster kit should include, for your well-being after the disaster, water. A gallon of water per person per day for 14 days. Every now and then you'll see 3 days. We're out in the desert. We are not LA. We need to be prepared for 14 days. Help is going to come to us more slowly than it will to LA in all likelihood, because LA is LA. They're going to get the attention first. 14 days worth. Now, a lot of times the questions I get is, how do you handle water? Because, you know, my husband and I, we need 28 gallons, and we have 2 small critters, so we need some more, all right? What we did was we got a water barrel, a 30-gallon water barrel, and we keep that outside. You can get drops. There are drops that you can add to the water. They're called Purogene, and it will keep the water good for 5 years, all right? You don't have to keep it good for 5 years, because I just tip it over every now and then, empty it out, put more water in, and put a few more drops in. This is how some of the schools districts in the area have water for their students, all right? Because if the earthquake happens while their students are there, they need to have water. You know, in my personal opinion, it's a disaster on a disaster to be trapped with 3,000 kids after an earthquake. You need food for 14 days, and if any of it's canned, you need a manual can opener. There are lots of the ways you can do the food. You can, number one, buy these prepared kits, all right, and they're great for what they are. There is no water for bathing and cleaning. The water that's in those kits is for drinking, but it is better to have drinking water than to have no water at all. So if that's what you want to do, do it. You can also look at getting a water can like this, all right? This is a high-density poly something or another can that doesn't have BPA. in it, so it doesn't leach. Again, you fill it up from the garden hose. You can use filtered water. You can use Perrier, like Dr. Mileti. You can put your drops in it, and it's good for 5 years. These can be stacked 3 high along the side of your garage, all right? And there you have your water. If you use plastic, like Arrowhead or Nestle, you need to replace those at least once a year because they do have BPA, and it will leach into the water. So you need to cycle every time you get a new case, you cycle the old one out. So it requires some work to stay prepared. For food, all right, my husband and I like peanut butter. We will hate it by the time the 14 days is over because we're eating a lot of peanut butter and crackers. We actually have some Spam. I decided, what's a disaster kit without Spam? You can get heater meals. These are meals that kind of work like a Stouffer's microwave dinner without the microwave. Huh? They're good. These are, they have a chemical pad in them. You put the vacuum-packed meal in the bag. You add the 1/3 of a cup of water that is included in this thing. You close it up, and in 12 minutes, you have a very edible meal, all right? They're good for 5 years when stored at room temperature. So that's another way you can do it. You can have energy bars. You should get things you like, tuna fish, Vienna sausage. I mean, any canned protein, you'll need protein that you can get. You will need, hopefully it goes without saying, flashlights that have an alternative power or extra fresh batteries. That means you need to rotate your batteries through and always have the size battery that you need. If your battery is running a lot for at least 2 weeks and maybe longer, there are people in New York that didn't get power for over a month after Hurricane Sandy hit. So you need to have enough batteries. We recommend that you get, number one, they sell lanterns that you can get, and also that you get a crank or solar-powered flashlight and radio. You can get them in the same component. First aid kit. One of the reasons Haiti suffered so badly is that they did not have first aid kits and people did not know first aid. So you need a first aid kit so you can do basic bandaging, basic slings for people who are hurt in your home. Now, how are you going to get hurt? I'll talk a little bit about hazard hunts. But our houses, in all likelihood, are not going to collapse. We have building codes. We have rebar in our houses, unlike Haiti. But things will be tossed around. As Dr. Mileti said, this stuff is bouncing back and forth for 100 minutes. Everything that you have on your walls or on your, any objects, art, and all that stuff is going to come flying across the room. That's how people are going to get hurt. Bleach to clean things. Because we're going to be dealing with some human waste that may not be going down the toilet. Tools, including a pry bar. You need to have a tool that will turn off your gas meter, but you turn it off only if you smell gas, because once you turn it off, the gas company has to come out and turn it on for you. And if 400,000 people in the Coachella Valley do that, it's going to take you a while. Work gloves for everybody in the family, okay? Nobody gets to coast on this. Everybody's going to be cleaning up. Duct tape and plastic sheeting, it may be that you shelter in place for a while. If we're not having too many aftershocks, you may decide to be in the den, and if it's January and it's 37 degrees outside at night, you may want to partition off the rest of the house with some plastic sheeting and perhaps have a fire in your fireplace if it is safe so that you can stay relatively warm. Or you may want to be outside in a tent on top of a plastic sheet so you're not getting wet during aftershock periods. You will need clothing. I recommend loose clothing. Every time I've been in a shelter as a worker, I gain weight because there's not a whole lot to do except eat. And so to have some nice loose clothes, some of us grow a little as we get older. You want to make sure that you check those clothes at least annually to make sure they still fit because you will be wearing them for a while. Blankets and towels. Blankets, you may end up sleeping outside. Towels, if you end up in a shelter, we don't provide towels. We provide 2 blankets. They're really warm. They're pretty comfortable, but they're a little scratchy. Pack at least a hand towel in your kit. Sanitary supplies such as toilet paper, soap, shampoo, you may be able to heat water to do some cleaning, assuming you have a lot of water. You may be able to use your pool. If you have a pool, you may be able to use some of your pool water for cleaning, although it may not be there. Your pool water may be in your yard, which would be another reason to have the plastic sheeting, all right? Water will slosh horribly during this, and so your pool may empty into your backyard. You need prescription and non-prescription medication. If you have prescription medicine, you need to take 14 days of that medicine and put it in your kit. And then when you renew the prescription, or at least every 6 months, you replace it with newer medication, because as you know, medicine expires. You need to make sure that you have current medicine in your kit. You should also have non-prescription. You will have headaches. There will be lots of headaches. You'll need to have Advil or whatever painkiller you have available to you. Pet supplies. How many of you have pets? Okay. What are you going to do about them? You have to have water for them. You have to have food for them. They need food and 14 days of food and water, okay? And you need to know where their carriers are. Burying their carriers under 300 pounds of junk in your garage is not going to work. You need to have that stuff available. The Red Cross, as you may know, does not take pets in its shelters because too many people have allergies. But we work very closely with animal control and sometimes with veterinarians to set up near our shelters places where animals can go. But they can't go there unless they have a carrier. Have your carriers handy. Also nice if you can get your pets used to being a carrier. We have cats. That's not going to work. You need to have a leash for your cats and dogs. Cats should, of course, have a halter and a leash. And it is a good idea to have their shot record, their inoculation record, copied and attached to the leash or inside the carrier, so that if you go to an animal control animal shelter during a disaster, you can prove that your pet has all of the shots that he or she is supposed to have had. So copy that shot record. You can get it from your vet and either put it in the carrier or attach it to the leash. You should have a tent. Jim and I have just a little 2-person hiking tent. It cost us under $70 at Sports Authority, and it's big enough for the 2 of us and the cats. All right? If we are having aftershocks, you are not going to want to be in the house. You will need cash and coins with bills no larger than $20 bills. All right? You will need this to buy food. You may need it to buy gasoline, assuming they can get the gasoline out of the ground. You need cash, because ATM machines will probably not be working, and credit card machines may not be working either. We recommend that you have at least $300 in cash. And I mentioned to somebody earlier that I keep my disaster kit outside, just in case any of you are interested. The cash is in the house. You need copies of important papers, a copy of your passport, a copy of your license, the insurance declarations page, because it's a lot easier when you get ready to start filing that claim if you know what your policy number is, all right? If you are a naturalized U.S. citizen, you should have copies of your documentation, of your green card or whatever your citizenship papers. Have copies of that. We do not recommend that you keep copies of your Social Security number, because if that stuff is stolen, that's how somebody steals your ID. Contact information for the family. We want you to be able to contact somebody not here, because, as I said, I mean, we have really kind of rotten cell phone coverage under the best of circumstances here in Rancho Mirage, so it may be that we won't have any, but we may be able to get calls outside the area. If you can, you want a phone tree. I will call my sister in Washington State. She will call my mother. She will call Jim's mother. We have a plan for doing that. You should have matches and candles, which you should not even consider using until you're absolutely positive you do not have a gas leak. And a local map. You may not be able to use your iPhone or whatever smartphone you have, your GPS thing. So have a local map. Garbage bags to pick up stuff that you need, and also it's a great way to store human waste when the toilets aren't working. Extra sunglasses, eyeglasses, just get an old prescription, and sunscreen. We live in a desert. You're smart if you add, if you have a gas grill with a propane tank, you have maybe either your grill, or if you have a fire pit, you may be actually able to cook some of the meat that you have in the freezer and start using that peanut butter and Spam later. You may want to have an axe to break into rooms you can't get to, a shovel, water purifier, and you need to check this at least annually. Now, I'm a snowbird. Mine gets checked every 6 months because when we leave, we take all of the food that's in our kit and put it in the refrigerator when we leave. Food expires and it deteriorates at high temperature. This delicious heater meal will be good for 5 years at room temperature, but at 115 degrees it lasts a month. All right. So here in the desert, you cannot store your food outside, at least not in the summer. You need to keep it inside. If you're a snowbird and you leave, either take the food with you, because there are disasters wherever you live, or put it in the refrigerator for the summer. Remember that plastic components leach into the water after 1 to 2 years if you're using just standard water bottles, and the medication expires. We grow, or we shrink, clothes, so you need to make sure that they're comfortable. Our feet change. Our feet continue to change our entire life, so you need to make sure that the shoes you have already in your nightstand still fit, and that they're sturdy, okay? At a minimum, they are sturdy running shoes, off-road running shoes, and better boots, because there will be glass. There will be nails. You need good shoes. Batteries deteriorate. Now, for your car, you should have a 1 or 2 person 3-day kit. All right, you're not going to be able to store this big 14-day kit in your car, but you need to have water and you need to have food for at least 3 days. You can get those through the Red Cross. You can also get them through the vendors at the back. You can get them at Walmart and places like that. So, make a plan. Where are your fire extinguishers and do they work? For fire, how are you going to get out of every single room in your house? Where will the family meet once you're out? In the neighborhood, so that we know everybody's out of the house, so firefighters aren't running into your house to find somebody that's over at the neighbor's having coffee. And outside the neighborhood, if the entire neighborhood's on fire, if we get hit with Santa Ana winds. How will you contact the fire department? What about your pets? What will you be wearing? If this happens in the middle of the night, yeah, you need to have something there. And if you have time, what will you grab? You need a bug-out list, so that if you know you're about to be evacuated, you have a list of what comes first. For Jim and me, it's the cats, and then my computer, and then probably some of our artwork, which is not expensive, just in case you were planning on stopping by, but we like it. For an earthquake, when you feel it shaking, you will drop, cover, and hold. Don't go to a doorway. It's not safe, because what's going to hurt you is the stuff that's flying off of your bookshelves and your objects of art and all of that stuff, all right? Don't be. You need to want to drop, cover, and hold. You're holding on because you don't want whatever you're under to bounce out from over you. What about your pets, and what are you going to be wearing? What have you done to minimize injuries? You need to go on a hazard hunt in your house. What is going to hurt you? There are several things you can do. You can get earthquake picture hooks at the hardware store, so your pictures, your art, your hanging artwork will not fly off of the wall and crown you with a sharp edge. You can use museum wax to glue down your objects of art that you have on shelves. You never have to dust under them again, okay? So put them down so that they won't fly off. So you need to do those types of things to protect. You need to have your hot water strap. You need to strap large furniture to the wall. You can get these, I hope I have mine, at the hardware store, safety straps. Have a little give, all right, so that that armoire doesn't come crashing down on you. Know how to turn off the gas, know how to turn off the water, only if necessary. Part of your plan should be to volunteer. We have lots of opportunities in disaster response. Here in the Valley, we respond to 35 or 45 disasters a year, okay? House disasters, they're mostly house fires, but if it's your house, it's just as big as it would be if it were an earthquake. It's health and safety, we teach CPR. Nursing, because we always have nurses in our shelters. Fundraising. And community education, such as this. Be informed. Part of that's what you're doing tonight. You need to know what the risks are and what you can do to mitigate the damage to yourself, your family, and your community. If you are ready to take care of yourself, then you are helping organizations such as the Red Cross so that we don't have to take care of you. You need to identify how local authorities will notify you. Patrick was saying that they will be broadcasting. Well, if they're broadcasting, it's not going to do you any good if you don't have a radio, all right? You've got to know that. You learn what you can do to prepare. And there are tons of lists. I mean, you must have 3 or 4 lists on your chairs tonight. Take the best of all of them, all right? Get ideas from everything and get what you think you will need for 2 weeks. And then share what you have learned. Do it. You can get prepared in a day. You can go get the stuff you need. We actually, I have a shopping list that we didn't copy tonight. It's a disaster, and it's done by store. It's done by the hardware store, Target or Walmart, Sporting Good, online, things that you can get. And we didn't copy it, but if you are interested in it, you can email me at kathleen.anamosa@redcross.org, and I'll be happy to email one to you. You don't wait until a disaster happens to prepare. You can do it now. You can do it in a weekend. Now, what I've just given you is 20 minutes of an hour or so presentation. So if you are interested in having this type of a presentation where I'm not talking quite so fast and I cover it in more detail, we are happy to speak to church groups. It's a free 1 hour, we don't charge. Church groups, schools, HOAs, Rotaries, service clubs. All you have to do is contact the Red Cross and we would be happy to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. You've just heard some incredibly practical advice. You've also heard from Dr. Mileti why you need it, and you will need it. So, and Dr. Mileti has a few other comments, and before he comes back, I want to assure you he does not have Perrier in his water storage containers. With the last name Mileti, you know it's Pellegrino.
Oh,
so,
it is Pellegrino, isn't it?
Dr. Mileti, come back up here. There are yellow cards on your chair, and this is. And before Dr. Mileti takes over, would all of the members of our Emergency Preparedness Commission who are here tonight please stand up for the Rancho Mirage? These are the folks that put this together. They're always working hard to make sure that we're informed about our options in case of an emergency, and we really appreciate your support of our community. Dr. Mileti.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about my favorite subject, you. I'm a sociologist. My first talk might have led you to think I was a seismologist, but I'm a sociologist. I had the opportunity years ago to sit down with the director of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, with a few colleagues, also social scientists. And we had a conversation with him. And the conversation went something like this. Did you know that most of the people in the world, in America, in Latin America, in Australia, everywhere, think that when disasters happen, the public panics? Do any of you think that? Raise your hand if you do. Those of us who have been to disasters have observed that the public doesn't panic. It can happen on rare occasion when 4 necessary but not sufficient conditions exist. but it's rare. And it certainly doesn't happen in disasters. Do you want to know what the conditions are? Yeah. People are in a confined space like this room. They're not in a confined space, people don't panic. Second condition, there has to be something going on in the room that convinces them that they'll die if they don't get out of the room. But we're human beings. What it would take to convince people that they're going to die if they don't get out of the room, I could actually contrive an experiment that brought about that perception in your mind, is if I blew up this row of people, then blew up this row of people, then blew up this row of people, then blew up this row, this row, this row, eventually, and about now, these people would get it.
Start on the other side of the room.
The third condition is there has to be escape routes. And the fourth condition is it has to be clear in people's mind that there isn't time for the living to traverse the escape routes and everybody's lives get saved. In those conditions, he'll step on her face to get out that door. But that's not what goes on at a disaster. Panic doesn't happen. It's a myth. And we said, you know, it's a myth that people loot and steal. And the director of FEMA said, oh, you're not going to convince me on that one. I've seen it on TV. To which we all said, no, you haven't. You've seen reporters accounting what they called looting and stealing on TV. It wasn't really looting and stealing. A recent example of what I mean happened in Haiti. A man whose family died in the Haitian earthquake. He had one infant child left who was dying of starvation, went to their equivalent of a 7-Eleven. The 7-Eleven was closed. There's been an earthquake. There was a box of powdered milk on a shelf, and he took it so that he could make milk to keep his infant alive. He got shot by the police for looting. Now, we know that people like the 7-Eleven in disasters give things away. You want free hamburgers? McDonald's will be handing them out for free. People actually give to each other in earthquakes. They don't take from each other. People share what they have to eat and drink with strangers. You want to move to a new place? Move next door to Kit. She'll be sharing that stuff with you.
Hope you like peanut butter.
And cats.
Yeah.
There's a myth, we said, that in disasters, emergency workers abandon their jobs. I know in my own city, the first thing the people who run the city have said to the city staff is, go home if you're at work and check on your loved ones, and then come back to work. Here's how the myth generally goes. Emergency workers like firefighters and police, etc., first responders, men, have role conflict because they have fear that their incompetent wives at home have lost the ability to eat and drink on their own. The reality is that there are multiple shifts reporting for work when disasters happen. When 3 Mile Island happened, the utility didn't know what to do. Hundreds and hundreds of at-home workers flocked to the broken nuclear power plant to help. That's what happens in police departments. That's what happens in fire departments. There isn't a shortage of emergency workers. People don't abandon their job. Doesn't mean they don't love their children. They find ways to check on their children and do the job. And I said, because I was the one that had this data, did you know that 95% of the victims that are rescued out of broken buildings in urban earthquakes are rescued by other victims, not search and rescue teams? By other victims. So look at the person sitting on your left. And then look at the person sitting on your right. Go on, take a minute and look. Those are the people that are going to be rescuing those of us in Rancho Mirage who might be trapped, who might need to be rescued. Why you need heavy gloves and a crowbar is so that you can be successful at it, because you will be doing it. Around the world, who rescues people in earthquakes are victims. And we also said there's a myth that people engage in non-rational behavior in disasters. People do the wrong things because they're fearful. They run outside in earthquakes. They dash to schools to get their kids. People do what they think is rational in earthquakes and disasters in general. The reason they do wrong things is because no one ever told them what the right thing to do was. So they did the wrong thing. They ran outside and got hit by roof tiles in an earthquake. And then there's a myth that there's aberrant behavior, that evacuees in cars will have fights on the highway with each other and in gas stations to buy gas. True in normal times, not true in disasters. The martial law needs to be declared, and the National Guard is needed to maintain law and order. The reality is, accidents go down in evacuations. Spousal abuse goes down. Crime all but disappears. What does go up in disasters is alcohol consumption, because it's a psychological stress mechanism, which is why I have my gym wrapped in bubble wrap. Summing up, the popular notion about how human beings, us, behave in disasters is that disasters strip the thin veneer of civilization from humanity, and it's everyone for themselves. And how that shows up in Rancho Mirage, you go to an HOA and they talk about locking the gates to keep the marauding herds of billionaire housewives who are now stealing jewelry from getting in. In other words, the public is the problem in a disaster. My friends and neighbors, the public is not the problem. The public is in fact the solution in disasters. The thin veneer of civilization is not stripped from humanity. It is, albeit temporarily, strengthened. The public's part of the solution. Why is that? Big earthquakes create service delivery gaps. Capacities of first responders are dramatically exceeded, and resident volunteers emerge spontaneously to fill the gaps. That volunteered public response by people like you, and I am talking to the person sitting in your chair. I'm describing how you'll behave when this earthquake happens. When you decide to help your neighbors, and you will transform the social glue that holds society together. Now, what on earth do I mean by social glue? Doesn't that sound like a word a sociologist would love? I do. Social glue is the blueprint that holds our society together, the blueprint that instructs us how to behave. Here's what it looks like. During normal times, the social glue that holds a society together, that enables us to have civilization, is something like this. Everybody only reveals a narrow piece of themselves to each other. It's called a role. Just like Shakespeare's plays, tonight I'm playing the role of expert. I don't reveal to you while I'm playing this role the rest of me. I'm not revealing the role of lover. I'm not revealing the role of son. I'm not revealing the role of customer when I go to buy things. Just the role of expert is what you see. And human beings during normal times in modern industrialized societies play roles. It's why the bigger the city, the lonelier you are, because you don't interact with people, you're interacting with segments of people or roles. However, when a disaster happens, that form of social bonding is immediately eliminated. And here's how. In fact, we have a name for it. It's called the disaster syndrome. If there were an earthquake, and I doubt that this building would suffer much damage, but then I'm not an engineer, let's pretend it did, and let's take out this side of the room again. This side of the room got squashed, and there were a few people, like in the middle of this section, that were still alive, but needed to be rescued. The people over here, who immediately put on their dust masks, more people died from the inhalation of dust in the Armenian earthquake than anything else. When buildings shake, they make dust. So in addition to shoes, put a dust mask in your nightstand and keep one in your back pocket. I don't, but it would be a good idea. At any rate, there's something called empathy, and there's something called guilt. And your empathy, putting yourself in the role of the other person. My God, I've got to help that person. I've got to rescue them. And then that's what you do. And the person across the aisle from you comes and helps too while you're there. You have feelings. You're a human being. You're sucked in because of your emotions. Then you find out the disaster happened to the community as a whole. It's not just this building. It's this whole town. No, it's the whole valley. No, it's all of Southern California. The media is telling you. There's been the collapse of major engineered high-rises in Los Angeles. And there are several conflagrations. LA is burning to the ground the way San Francisco did in 1906. It's very likely you'll hear those stories. And you'll have that empathy and compassion for the human collective. And in that circumstances, you will give up your individual identity. You will cease to exist as an individual. And you'll be engaged in what social scientists call collective behavior. The only behaving entity that's there is the collective. So it's like this. Any of you go to high school ever? Sorry for the rest of you. Any of you go to a football game in high school? Any of you ever find at the end of the football game you had no voice left because you were yelling so hard and you didn't know it when you were doing it? That's collective behavior. The mass contagion sucks you up. This happens around the world, and you cease to interact with one another as segmented roles. Differences between people, socioeconomic status disappears out the window. Rich people and poor people working hand to hand to rescue other strangers. Black people, white people, racists and non-racists working together hand in hand to rescue other people. At the end of disasters, interview victims, people who have lost loved ones, and one of the things they say is, I can't explain to you. I almost feel bad about it. I went through this horrible thing and lost people I loved, but something felt good about it. And what felt good was the love and compassion of being part of a human community that for a brief period of time really cared about each other. It transforms the social order. It's short-lived. As soon as FEMA comes to town with its bureaucratic forms, an organization that says, sorry, you can't come in here for a warm night's sleep. We're waiting for the Rancho Mirage inspectors to get here, and they haven't been. Where are they? Etc. That brings that good mood to an end. What it looks like is emergency volunteer groups emerge. They work for days and nights without sleep to help strangers. Group leadership emerges in those emergent, volunteer, spontaneous groups. Guess who's the leader? It's not the person with the title from before the disaster. It's the person that has the skills that are applicable to the job the group's trying to do. So a 13-year-old who knows how to use leverage and a crowbar to get the beam off the leg ends up leading the group of adults. Leadership in the group rotates. We've studied it. We've been there with them. What I'm saying is the people in this room, you, will be first responders in this earthquake. Who will respond to this earthquake? You. Who will rescue you if you need to be rescued? The odds are 95 out of 100 it'll be people you don't know or neighbors, the people who are where you are. How will we get through this? We'll get through this as a community of us, of the average citizens. What we've just gone over, what I've said, is a cultural universal. It transcends human culture. It happens in Japan. It happens in Chile. It happened in Northridge. It happened in Mexico City. It happened in Guatemala. It happened in Nicaragua, etc., etc. There may have been species of human beings that don't respond to earthquake disasters this way, but they died out. Now, this response is predictable. And since it's predictable, Mr. Director of FEMA, if the public, in fact, can be counted on, and it can, to rise to the occasion in disasters, to be the real first responders, why can't we train them ahead of time to give them the skills they need so that when they're responding, and they will, they know how to do it, rather than make it up on the fly? Well, a couple of weeks later, something called CERT training was born. And it was born out of the conversation just like the one I had with you tonight. Rancho Mirage makes CERT training available to any resident of the city for free. You have to pay the $68 to take the 2.5-day long course, but then the city reimburses you. They're giving it away. Will you need it? Not until the earthquake. But then you'll be glad you had it. Why? Because you will be responding. So if you will be responding, yes, get your crowbar. Yes, make sure you've got some water. Yes, get good heavy gloves, but get CERT training. So I'd like to know, just to see a show of hands, regardless of where you live, how many of you have done CERT training? Wow, that's quite a number. Okay. How many of you are Rancho Mirage residents only and done CERT training? Raise your hand. Okay, good. We got to find out what the other cities are. Maybe we want to move. Yeah. Is Richard Cook here? Richard, would you just walk up here, you don't have to say anything, but let people see who you are. This is the man that Rancho Mirage hires to give CERT training for free to Rancho Mirage residents. And so if any of you who are Rancho Mirage residents, by the way, all of you should consider CERT training, but if you want Rancho Mirage to pay for it, this is the fellow who'll be leading your CERT training course, 2.5 days long. I promised I'd do this. I have not done the CERT training. So in front of all these people, I want to sign up and do the CERT training. And the city is also, thank you very much, you can sit if you'd like. The city's also committed that all the employees of the city do CERT training, but Rancho Mirage has bumped it up a notch. What do I mean? We're not going to stop until everyone has CERT training, so which means we'll be doing this forever. But in addition, we want the equivalent of CERT training inside of all of our homeowner associations, our HOAs. And so what we mean by that is, if people, 95% of our residents live in HOAs. So those are like communities. For those of you that are in little ones, medium-sized ones, or big ones, you know they're like towns and villages. They're unto themselves and behind gates. They're enclaves. The large ones can be like cities responding. If you're going to give them CERT training, why not also train them in division of labor, specialized job? You check on houses to see who needs help. You do this, you do that, and then come back and let us know what's going on inside of HOAs. And so the city has organized what's now called a task force. What that means is fire ants willing to do what it takes to help HOAs understand how easy it is to put together plans for how an HOA, local community, can respond to this earthquake disaster when it happens.
Thank you all for your attendance. Once again, thanks to the Emergency Preparedness Commission. Ira Smotrich, thank you very much.
Thank you.